Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
The first really big thing was the day my daughter started kindergarten, I had a nervous breakdown, and it had nothing to do with her. Like, I went to work and I felt super worthless. I felt like I was going to ruin my daughter's life because I was this way, and I was going to make her life terrible for the rest of her life. And I think her going to kindergarten kind of just clicked that, like, she's only in kindergarten and she's going to have a dad that's broken for the rest of his life and isn't going to be what she needs as a dad. And I went to work and I texted my wife at the time and I said, you guys need to leave. And she's like, what? And I said, you need to leave and never come back to me again, because I can't do this. I can't do this to you anymore.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. Join your hosts, Billy and Brian, a couple of average dudes who will serve as your armchair life coaches as we share our life experiences, both the good and the bad, in an effort to help us all better understand how we can enjoy and make the most of the life we have left to live in a more meaningful way. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with us through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Brian, on the bass. Brian, how you doing over there, man?
I'm groovy, man. Groovy.
Just groovy. Just
yeah, you got to
breezy?
tone it down when you say groovy. You can't be like, I'm groovy.
You're just breezy groovy over there.
Doesn't work.
Are you feeling groovy? You're feeling laid back because you're at home in a more comfortable environment?
Yeah, we're doing a remote session today. So I just stumbled out of bed, threw a waffle in my mouth, and here I am.
Ooh, what do you put on your waffle?
Nothing. Butter.
What?
That's it. Straight butter, man. I take my waffle straight like a man. None of that fluffy, stuff on it.
That's ridiculous. That fluffy stuff is what makes it taste delicious.
Well, you can't even taste the waffle then.
I'm currently taking open requests for new hosts on this show because that is preposterous that you would do such a thing. Okay. You don't. So I'm going to give a shout out to
your waffle.
No, I want to taste.
Why don't you just eat whipped cream and strawberries, Well,
I'll do that too. Well, but I want, here's what I want. I want the crunch in the waffle. That's really what it's all about.
Okay. So what do you put on your waffle?
I'm a syrup guy. I do like syrup and I like fruit on there, but Famous Dave's Brunch has this pecan praline syrup that I would fight anybody to get to because it is that amazing. And I would lose that fight, but it would still be worth it as long as I got to taste that pecan praline syrup. It's unbelievable.
Well, maybe I'm turned around on this. I've never tried that particular syrup, so maybe this would change my state. But dude, when I eat food, I got to taste the food I'm eating. You know what I mean? Like, I don't use condiments. When I eat burgers, maybe I throw a little mustard on. That's it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess I like sauces. I'm all about the sauces. So that's how I roll. Well, the reason why we're doing a remote here is because we actually have a special episode. We're recording on a Saturday morning. And we know that we said last week was our last episode of season 1, but we are actually doing 2 special episodes. We are talking to 3 of our listeners these next 2 episodes. Today, we are talking to brothers Scott and Lee, who reached out to us and said, hey, your podcast has really had meaning and it's resonated with us. And we reached out to them and said, well, do you want to talk about why that's the case? Because we think other listeners may appreciate that. And they've agreed to be here. So Scott and Lee, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You guys kind of described yourselves as just normal middle-aged guys. Scott has a wife. He's got two teenage kids, just trying to live his best life. Scott works in commercial landscape construction in the Twin Cities area and enjoys spending time with family and friends. Lee describes himself as an IT guy in Sioux Falls, a divorced single dad with an 8-year-old daughter and a golden retriever who enjoys sports. And they're here to promote healthy emotional communication for men. So guys, we really thank you for being here. We know that's difficult to put yourself in a vulnerable position like this and share your stories, but we are eternally grateful for it.
Yeah, thanks.
So if you guys are listeners, obviously, and we checked to verify that you knew what was going on. So we know that you're actual legit listeners. So thank you for being two of dozens of listeners that we have out there. Could you guys talk about your roles in your life? So you guys, it sounds like you guys kind of combine them here. So what are the 10 roles that the two of you play in your lives?
For me, father, husband, son, brother, active adult, professional leader, community leader, sports fan. That's kind of goal for me, I guess.
Yeah, you said lake lover. And you said lake lover as well. If you're in Minnesota, that's kind of how that goes.
Right. Left off a big one.
Yeah. That's I mean, there's 10,000 of you, might as well enjoy them over here. So,
right.
And then, so Scott, can you talk about what are the 3 of those roles that you are looking most forward to in the second half of your life?
Yeah, I think husband, lake lover, and traveler, actually. For me, roles are starting to shift a little bit. My kids are teenagers, but looking 5 years in the future, it's going to be an empty nest. And so a husband is a big part of that. And then the cabin up north and traveling are 2 things that I'm really looking forward to in the next phase.
So how do you anticipate your role as a husband is shifting once you become empty nesters? And how old are your kids?
16 and 13.
Okay. So you've got some time left. You've got 5 years to transition in here. But how do you see your role as a husband adjusting once you guys become empty nesters?
Yeah, it's still kind of evolving, but we're seeing it already. You know, our kids, they have their own things. They have their own life and they have their own interests. And our roles with them are definitely less and less every year. So my wife and I have had to really kind of look at how our relationship works, you know, when it's not just about where you're going and who's getting fed where and who's got hockey and who's got dance, and you actually have to start dating again or hanging out and enjoying each other's company. What are we going to do? And we can't just always go to the bar and drink a whole bunch of beer or whatever. So what are our interests? And I think that's kind of something we're really looking forward to.
I like that you talked about started dating again. And so, Brian, I'm kind of curious, do you and Kathleen date? Do you guys still continue to go on dates?
100%. And I think your outlook on this, just the fact that you said dating, shows that you're looking at it as an opportunity to kind of rekindle the romance with your wife, you know? Yeah, absolutely. And yes, to answer your question, we absolutely do that. We set aside time specifically and call them dates just to make sure that connection's still there, you know?
Very cool. And then, so you talked about traveler. I'm curious, are you guys looking at more intensive trips as your kids get older and as you guys look to be empty nesters?
Yeah, definitely. We enjoy, that's definitely something that the 2 of us enjoy doing together. And it's something that I think we don't know exactly what that looks like or how frequent or where, but we are open-minded about it. We would like to see as much as we can. So whatever that looks like, and not necessarily just in retirement, you know, we want to start that process as soon as the kids are out and we don't have the schedule of dance and hockey and regimented things, and we can kind of get away. So
excellent. And then, so where's your guys' cabin?
Leech Lake.
So up north from where we are. So for people who are not familiar with Minnesota, can you describe that area and where it is in the state if they were looking for it in the map?
Yeah, it's about 35 miles south of Bemidji and about an hour north of Brainerd, kind of right in the heart of cabin country up north. And it's lots of trees and lots of scenery and lots of fishing and hunting and all of the bears. Yeah, all sorts of things. So yeah, it's fun.
It's a big lake too.
Big lake. Yep.
It's huge. Like if you look on a map of Minnesota and look kind of in the middle of the state and you see a big blue dot, that's Leech Lake right there. It's a big lake. Not as big as Lake Superior, obviously, but it's one of the largest lakes in the state, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think it's like the 4th maybe behind the Mille Lacs and Red Lake and Lake of the Woods.
How long have you guys had a cabin there?
This will be our 5th season.
Very nice. And then do you guys have boats up there? Do you have snowmobiles up there?
Boats. Yeah, we share the cabin with my brother and sister-in-law, Tara's sister and her husband. So
Okay.
it's kind of a family compound, and try to get as many people up and have a good time as we can. And it's been fun.
One thing I forgot to mention here. So I actually know Scott because I went to high school with his wife. So that's how we have that connection right here. And Scott said that he was listening to the podcast and he shared it with his brother Lee. So Lee, let's get you into the mix here. You said that you're an IT guy, but what are the 3 roles that you are looking forward to in the second half of your life?
I'm in a little different spot. I think father is number 1 because my daughter is like she's like blossoming and opening up and becoming like, not that she wasn't a cool kid, but like she's so much fun to hang out with, and you can see the maturity. So I look forward to that every day. And then just brother and son, like reconnecting and going through a divorce and everything kind of gets all messed up. So then it'd be nice to just reconnect and see them more and rebuild the bonds that we had before everything else came in. So
Spend some
kinda,
quality time.
yeah, exactly. Like go back to how it should be and that sort of thing.
And you guys have, we were joking about this before, but you guys have a pretty close-knit family because Scott drove all the way out to Sioux Falls, and then your sister is there as well. Where does she live?
Watertown. So it's a couple of hours north of here.
Gotcha. So I'll tell you that our family wouldn't drive 5 minutes to see each other. My sisters, I don't think they would drive 5 minutes to see me, or vice versa. So, and I love my sisters, and I hope that they love me too. It's just a different bond that we have with them. So that's very cool that you guys still have that family bond, that family connection. So Lee, I know part of your story is that you had mentioned the divorce kind of shifted some things for you, and the fact that the divorce took place when it did had a significant impact. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, Lee and Scott are going to share their story around why it's so important for us to talk about emotional mental health. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps us on our quest to reach the top of the podcast charts. Finally, since you can't make a mixtape for your friends and loved ones like you used to do, share this podcast with them instead. We hope our experiences resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, let's take a minute to be present with our breath. If you're listening somewhere safe and quiet, close your eyes and slowly inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and open your eyes. You feel better? We certainly hope so. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Brian and I are on a remote call here with Lee and Scott. And Brian, we're probably going to have to post this at some point so you guys can see just how I have set up this recording tent that I have. So if I can give you all a visual, I have 3 stools around the outside of a comforter, and then I have a mop broom, propping up the center. So I'm in this recording tent here in order to dampen the sound. Otherwise, it just echoes the whole time. And we are here joined with Lee and Scott, who are brothers. They are listeners of our show, proof that we actually have listeners to this show. So thank you guys for listening. And it sounds like our goal has been that we hope that what we talk about resonates with our listeners. And Lee, you actually reached out to us and you shared that what we talked about in episode 3, where I shared my own personal struggles with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, that resonated with you. And I'm just kind of curious, can you walk us through your own personal struggles with mental health?
Sure. Now that when you get a diagnosis or you start to understand it as an adult, then you start looking back and going, okay, when did this start? Like I can go back and say, like, I felt the way I felt since I was probably 8 years old. The way my depression works is it's a self-loathing type of depression where I just hate myself, and everything I do is wrong, and then it makes it worse, and I just spiral and go down and down and down. So I can go back to being in school. We went to a private church school, and there was just something about one of the lessons to where, like, if you do this wrong, you're going to go to hell type of thing that hit me different than both my brother and sister went to the same school. I have friends to this day that went to that same school. I've talked to them about it. Nobody else thought like, well, you better not ever make a mistake for the rest of your life. Otherwise you're going to go to hell. Your family's going to go to hell, that whole thing. And that's where it kind of started, where I put pressure on myself that was just unrelenting. And I felt that way for a long time. The reason Scott sent me the episode or the podcast was because he said that I was very much like you, to where I was the guy that walked in and was always fun. I could put on a face of happiness, fun, the fun guy, the jokey guy forever, and no one would ever know. So I got very good at living that way. But as I got older, as you get married, as you have kids and you get mortgages and jobs, and the stress of all of it got to a point where I couldn't just put that face on anymore. And at that point, I still didn't know like I had depression or I had anxiety. I just thought, like many people do, I'm the only one that feels this way. I just got to swallow it and figure it out and make sure everybody else is okay and I can handle it. Well, I just got to a point where I couldn't handle it. And the thing that really changed the way I was thinking or realizing was, I don't know if you listen to the Power Trip Morning Show on KFan in the cities, but Chris Hockey did an interview and he literally is sitting there saying stuff that was in my brain. Like, I'm driving down the road. I would never want to take my life, but I hoped that every car would cross median and come hit me. Or every morning I woke up, I was mad that I woke up. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted it to be over. I didn't see a way out. I didn't see anything along those lines. So then that clicked, and I talked to my wife at the time, and she was like, well, that's great. Like, let's start to work on this. And then the first really big thing was the day my daughter started kindergarten, I had a nervous breakdown, and it had nothing to do with her. Like, I went to work and I felt super worthless. I felt like I was going to ruin my daughter's life because I was this way, and I was going to make her life terrible for the rest of her life. And I think her going to kindergarten kind of just clicked that, like, she's only in kindergarten and she's going to have a dad that's broken for the rest of his life and isn't going to be what she needs as a dad. And I went to work and I texted my wife at the time and I said, you guys need to leave. And she's like, what? And I said, you need to leave and never come back to me again, because I can't do this. I can't do this to you anymore. And to her credit, she left work, came and took me to the hospital. And I went into an inpatient facility for a few days. But I would say that first time that I went in voluntarily, because I was like, there's something wrong. I need to figure something. But I went in there thinking, give me a pill, give me something, give me an answer I can have that's going to take it all away and make me never feel this way. That's not how it works. After you do it, after you realize it, or after you go through it, that's not how it works. A lot of what triggers my bad episodes is not sleeping. So I slept probably 3 hours in a 14-day span before that too, because I just can't turn your brain off. And it just eats at you and eats at you. And I lay there and cry. I'd go sleep on the couch and just cry because I was like, I can't ruin people's lives anymore, or I can't be a bother anymore. And so I thought I got there and they're like, you look tired. So they gave me a shot and put me so I could sleep. I woke up and I felt great. And I'm like, I don't need to be in here anymore. Like, I get it. I understand. I just didn't sleep. I need to do this kind of stuff. And I was in there for 2 or 3 days. Then I checked myself out because I thought I got this under control. They gave me some meds and I thought, well, we got this. Took the meds and hated it because I didn't feel feelings then. Because I know you guys talked about in some of those, I know like in Brian's episode too, like where you just, the medication isn't the answer all the time because it doesn't change it. It just makes you not feel anything. I wasn't ever excited. Sure, I was never like depressed, but I was never excited about anything. And so then
it treats the symptoms and not the problem.
Yes. It just, yeah, it wasn't how I wanted to live. I was like, I'd rather have depression, but still get to be excited when my daughter does something than to never feel anything again. So, and then that was probably 2017. And so then I was doing okay, but it was one of those where it's an up and down. And I went to counseling, and it was a battle, and it was a fight. And then I came in August of 2019. It was my birthday, actually, and it's a stupid reason to do it. I'm not a person that's a Facebook, I'm going to go share everything to everyone. I was watching the Hall of Fame induction speech of Brian Dawkins, safety for the Eagles, it's super weird. But he had depression, and he started talking about it, and he started saying like, hey, if you have this, you need to let people know. Because somebody told me once that they had it, and I didn't feel alone anymore, and I got help. So then I just wrote this long thing saying, hey, this is how I feel. This is what I feel. I'm not asking you to do anything. I don't expect anything from you. But this is what I'm dealing with. If you're dealing with this, I'll talk to you if you want me to. I don't have all the answers, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm going to feel better now because I'm not hiding this thing. It's not a secret. I'm going to feel awesome. This will fix it. And it felt great for a day because people were like, we're with you, blah, blah, blah. But then anytime I went anywhere and walked into a room, I was the guy that was broken. I was the guy there was something wrong. And I was the guy that everybody walked on eggshells around. And I was the guy that people wanted to help but didn't know how. And and me personally, I hate that. I don't like being the center of attention. I don't like people pitying me or anything like that. So it backfired huge. And it made me feel like, God, look at you. You're just a piece of garbage. Like, look, these people feel sorry for you because there's something wrong with you. And it slowly started to spiral. And with my family, I became more and more isolating. Like they would have stuff and I'd be like, no, we have stuff to do here. We're not going to come. Because I didn't want to be the guy that walked in the room anymore. I didn't want to be the guy that was pitied or felt sorry for. So I started to really distance myself from everyone. Even my ex-wife and my daughter, like there was days where I would just be like, I need to go to sleep. That was my answer to everything. I'm going to go to sleep because I thought I can just get through this day. I'll be fine. But that doesn't work. Going to sleep is great until you wake up and it sucks all over again.
It sounds like then that strain on your relationship is what kind of led to the falling out with your now ex-wife. And so if you're comfortable, do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. Like I gave her tons of credit because she tried and she was there for me and she did a lot, put up with a lot of stuff. And the reason we're divorced is not really because of her. It was because you become codependent. And my whole thing was, I don't ever want to be a bother to anyone. So I would just hold it all inside all the time. as much as I could. Looking back, I probably didn't do a really very good job, but I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it. And my whole thing was, I'm going to take care of those two, my daughter and my wife. I'm going to make sure they have everything. So I would do everything. Like I would do the cooking, the cleaning. I would do everything, thinking like that would make me feel better because she was happy. Well, I just neglected myself and I just ate it and ate it and ate it. She wasn't asking for that. I was doing that on my own because I was thinking that's what I should do. And it just came to a head where I was like, I'm never going to get better if my whole thing is I have to take care of this other person. Because I know I couldn't turn it off. There's no way I could stop being that person. Even if I was doing a shitty job of being that person, in my mind, I'd always think, but she has to come first. She has to come first. So like us getting divorced largely is just because I need to not have anyone besides my daughter depend on me. I can't physically have someone depend on me because I know that I'm going to slip back into that pattern of, okay, they're more important. They're what matters. You just deal with it. You can handle it. Just take the burden on you. You handle it. Make sure everybody else is okay. And I've told her that 100 times. Like, this isn't even about her. I mean, everybody has their issues, and there's frustrations, and there's stuff that happened that you just at some point you look back, you're like, that was dumb. Like, but at the core of it was just I knew I could never completely get better. And the real thing that got me to that point was in December 3rd, 2019. I took my daughter to school because we were working, or no, I wasn't working from home. I don't know why I was off work that day even. I took her to school and she would look down, and she was in first grade. And she just looked at me and I said, "What's wrong, Belle?" And she said, "Oh, nothing, because she does the same stuff I do." And I said, "No, what's wrong, sweetheart?" And she said, "I just don't want my dad to be sad anymore." And it was the same thing as the day we dropped her off at kindergarten, where I thought, I'm effing my kid's life up. My daughter's going to grow up with a piece of garbage father, and she's going to have to worry about this guy for the rest of her life. So I went home that day, and I took every pill that we have in that house, and I laid them out. I laid them out in piles with the bottle next to them because I don't ever want to be a bother. That's why I didn't shoot myself. That's why I didn't do anything that was messy, because I didn't want anybody to have to clean up after me. So I put the pills in piles. And I lined them up all around the counter. And I sat there and just cried leaning against the counter knowing I was going to do this. And my dog, craziest thing in the world, my dog bit my hand, grabbed me by the shirt sleeve and pulled me away. And I pushed him away, and he got up and started barking at me like he's never barked at me before, and pulled me away again. And I just fell down to the ground crying. And I look up and there's a picture of my daughter on the wall. And I instantly snapped out of it. Thank God that dog was there. Like, he gets everything he ever wants for the rest of his life now. But after that, I called my wife and I said, "This is what just happened." And she said, "Okay, call the helpline." So I called the helpline. Unbeknownst to me, she called 911 and said, "You need to go do a wellness check on this person." Well, I talked to the helpline, and they were like, "Well, let's see if we can get you in, blah, blah, blah." Well, the police came, and they just took me right to the hospital. They're like, and they said, "We hear this is going on." And I was just like, "Yep, let's go. I'm done. I can't do this anymore." And this time I walked into the hospital, and it was another situation where I hadn't slept before it happened. I walked into the hospital, and I do the intake stuff, and there's a doctor that is there that's one of the head doctors, and I saw him the first time. And we sit down, and he looks at me, and he said, "All right, are you here to do this, or is this just more bullshit this time?" And I was like, "What?" Last time, and he's like, "This week, you aren't going to fix this. You aren't going to get rid of this. You are not going to cure this. You have to accept that this is something that you're going to live with. And we got to teach you how to live with this and how to deal with this, cope with it." And it changed everything. It completely changed everything. because I took the time to learn, and I took the time to talk to counselors, and they put me through tests. I mean, I sat and did all of these personality tests and all this stuff to understand where it was coming from. And it's just completely changed everything about how I do life, And so that's kind of what got me to that.
Can you talk a little bit about what they had you do once you went back to the hospital a second time? What were some of the tools that they equipped you with in order to manage when you were feeling low, so that you could pull yourself back up?
We did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy or training. So a lot of it was coping mechanism. Because you're going to have a day where you think, gosh, you're an idiot. It's stopping that thought before it gets to the point where you can't pull yourself back out of it again. I probably, and like the mindfulness stuff, that was part of it too. I mean, people would probably laugh at me. I do positive affirmations every morning. I list 3 things I did good at night. I list 3 things I'm looking forward to during the day. There'll be times where something will happen and it will start to set me off. And I will talk to myself out loud and be like, dude, you know that that person's actions, that's not about you. You didn't do anything wrong. That's just the way that they're feeling. They might be having a bad day, or I can't control, like in beginning of March, my company laid off 30%, and I was one of the 30%. Before that would have just made me go like, well, look at you, you worthless pile of garbage. Like, of course they didn't. You didn't deserve to stay there. And now I'm like, they didn't have the money. I had been there one of the least amount of times. I'd only been there a year. And I had this conversation out loud to myself or with my dog. Because it seems silly. It seems like hippie-ish. It seems like
especially where we grew up. And Billy, when you grow up in rural areas, that stuff is hippie. It's
absolutely, it's right. Oh man, I talked about it before, where I told my dad when at one time that I thought I needed to go to therapy, and he was like, "That's for nut jobs."
Yeah,
exactly. You don't talk about your feelings. What?
Right.
That talking about your feelings, that's what women do. It plays into that toxic masculinity that unfortunately we see in rural areas. And if you live in a rural area and you're listening to this and you're like, what are you talking about? I grew up in a rural area. We grew up in rural areas, and it's real. Like it really is this undue pressure to be a man and that sort of thing. And I'm the first one to admit that there's, that I am not very manly. I am a beta male to the nth degree. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. So I've probably just lost 10% of our listeners right there. It's just that you're right. It's difficult to express when you're feeling that way. And then I think that bubbles over for 30, 40, 50 years. And then you find yourself in a situation where you feel like the only solution is a final solution. And we're seeing that. You can take a look at statistics, especially out in the West, areas like Idaho and Montana, which are extremely isolating areas just because of the mountains. You're actually finding really, really high rates of middle-aged men committing suicide out that way because there's so little in the way of mental health support.
And access is probably a big thing, even not to mention the stigma. Access, finding a good therapist in these small towns is probably not easy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's tricky. Well, one thing I was going to say was, when you were talking about the guilt, like we had parents that were supportive and were always there. We didn't you can't really have much of a better childhood. I rarely remember our parents fighting. I don't remember. There was just nothing like that. We were a Midwestern family where not a lot was talked about either. Like you didn't Lutherans, kind of, everything's kind of like hush hush. But we never had anything we didn't want. None of that stuff. My ex-wife, she had a tough childhood. Like stuff happened in her childhood that I felt awful. And so then when I'm feeling this way, I'm going, you don't have a right to feel this way. Like, she's the one that should be this way. So it made my guilt 10 times more. And I don't know, like, you feel like you're letting everyone else down. And even like, I had a conversation with someone, the same lady that cuts my hair all the time. We're talking about it, and she was talking about someone who committed suicide in her family. And she's like, I just don't understand it. I don't know how you could be so selfish. I don't understand all this stuff. And I said, and she didn't know that I had suicide stuff. And I said, I told her the story. And then I said, it was, to me, I thought me being gone for everybody but my daughter was going to make their life better, because they didn't have to worry about me. I was going to not cause problems anymore. My issues were no longer going to be there, so they didn't have to worry about it. Like, it had nothing to do with getting attention or being selfish. It was, I don't want other people. I mean, that's why I didn't do it in a violent way. That's why if I laid out all the pills with the bottles next to them, so if I took a portion of them and they didn't, it knocked me out before I got to take all of them, it was easier to clean up. Like, shit like that goes on in your brain as somebody who all they care about is other people. Like, you don't care about yourself at all. So it's, when people say it's a selfish thing, I'm sure for some people it is, but for me and a lot of people I have talked to, it's not a selfish thing. It's like, I don't want people to worry about me.
We had an amazing conversation with Dr. Yvette Erasmus, and that episode is going to air later on down the road. And she talks about the importance of self-love. And really that's where our healing starts, is through self-love. Lee, I'm curious, who initiated then the conversation between you and your wife to divorce, if you don't mind talking about that?
It was kind of one of those when we'd fight it both. It always got brought up. And after counseling sessions, my counselor never said get divorced, but he was almost like, something needs to change. I don't know what that is, but like this, if that pressure is always there, you're never going to get past what's going on. So you guys either need to change. And we'd done marriage counseling, we'd done couples counseling, we'd done all that stuff. And in my brain, I just was like, I like self-love. I'm like, I cannot love myself when I'm worrying about making someone else happy at this point, especially when it's not your child. A child and a spouse are two different things. Spouse is an adult who should be able to handle their own stuff. A child is dependent on you. I can make my child happy and still make myself happy. When it's a spouse, because there's so much history behind it too. I mean, we've been married for 10 years, been together for 13. There was so much stuff that would have had to have been undone that, to me, I just didn't see that it was possible. I didn't feel like I could ever not feel that way. And so it was me that like basically said, like, I can't do this anymore. I got to be done. And because if I'm going to be happy and be the best dad I can be, I can't do it this way. And ultimately, being a dad is the number one thing I got.
It sounds like you guys still have an amicable relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you know, I think I've talked about this before, or I'm talking about it in a later episode. I always respect divorced couples that still manage to have an amicable relationship, because, especially when there are children involved, because really you're setting a course of behavior and modeling a course of behavior for your children that you can respect somebody with whom you have disagreements, and that this is how you treat people. You treat people with respect. So I applaud both of you for handling it that way. And Lee, I want to say thank you for sharing that story.
So Lee, if you could say anything to someone in the position that you were in, what would it be?
First thing I tell everybody is give it one more day. If you think that it's not good enough, you can kill yourself tomorrow, but don't kill yourself today. Wait till tomorrow. And then tomorrow, give yourself one more day. That's just sleep on it. Just sleep. That's what the first thing I tell them. But the main thing I always tell people is you aren't alone. You are not by yourself, because if that's how it feels. It feels like you are the only one that's ever gone through this, struggled with this. But you're not alone. And when people ask, and like when I talk to Scott, like I'm trying to explain to him, because one thing you really want is you want someone to understand it. And I can never make anybody else understand it. That doesn't have that. People, and I said, take the saddest you've ever been. Like somebody died tragically, whatever. And that grief that you feel like you can never overcome. Then take that and angle all that grief towards yourself and how much you hate yourself. And then know, well, this has been going on for a year. There is no hope that this will ever go away. Because that's how I felt. Because I felt like, and then when I started looking back, like I felt this way for 30 years inside. So it just continually builds up to where you're like, well, how could it possibly get better? I just want to say it does. It does. You just have to not only ask for help, or not only admit that you have a problem, but accept that you have a problem. That was my biggest thing in the beginning. Was I was like, yep, I have depression, but I didn't accept the fact that this was going to be part of my life forever. So once you accept the fact that this is not going to go away, but you can manage it, that's the biggest thing that's the biggest key to all of it, is setting your expectations of, I can handle this. There are going to be shitty days, but I can get through those days. As opposed to, wow, I'm taking this medicine. Why do I have a day like this? Why am I still depressed today? I thought this was I went to counseling yesterday. Why am I feeling this way again? Well, everybody has bad days. So my thing would be just know you're not alone, admit it, and accept the fact that you need help and that it's going to be a work for the rest of your life.
I think it's so important to understand it. You're not alone. I know, like, even for me to start this podcast with Brian, a big roadblock for me was coming to grips with, well, who wants to listen to a privileged straight white male talk about their mental health issues? I mean, get over yourself, dude. And you know, in the research we're finding is it's middle-aged men and predominantly white men who are committing suicide. And I don't understand that. And, you know, I look at so much of the social inequities that exist in this world. Like, why am I feeling this way when I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I had to endure the racism and the homophobia and whatever else is the hatred that people endure, man, like how would I even carry on when I can barely carry on as this privileged straight white male? And I talked to somebody about that, and they said that's exactly why you need to talk about it, is because yes, all these other things that are happening, they're horrible and they are a burden in people's lives, but mental health affects every human being, regardless of your age, your race, your gender, your privilege. It affects every human being. So you need to talk about this. And so I'm very happy that you're taking the time as well to talk about this and that you've been open about it. I think this is a great time for us to take a break, and then we come back. Scott, you're going to share your side from what it was like as a bystander, as an outsider, as a brother, witnessing your brother go through this. Thank you, everybody, for listening to The Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thanks for listening to The Mindful Midlife Crisis. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to help get you over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Oh, and don't forget to show yourself some love every now and then too. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Brian and I are talking to listeners Scott and Lee. They are brothers, and Lee just told an amazing story here, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be vulnerable and tell that story.
And incredibly brave for that matter. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, Scott, we just kind of wanted to ask you here then, so as his brother, as Lee's brother, and you're kind of witnessing going through this, it sounds like you were listening to my story from episode 3, and you were making connections between my story and Lee's story, and you were actually the one who shared the podcast with him.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious, as you were listening to it, what resonated with you as someone from the outside looking in?
So a little, I guess, history. I'm 5 years older than my brother. He's the little brother, and he was always kind of following around, tagging along. I'm type A, kind of all the way, very regimented. Lee was always the fun-loving guy, the fun-loving kid. He always made us laugh. He made my friends laugh. That's how he got to tag along, right? And that's how I associated with him. I was always a little bit more socially awkward, a little more, had a hard time cracking up, had a hard time having fun. And he was always just on, and I envied that. And so my opinion of him was kind of framed around that. And Billy, being around you, meeting you a few different times, you're kind of that character. You're on. You walk into a room, you're on. And then when you were telling your story, and there was just so much crossover between what he had relayed to me through his experience and what you were saying. And I'm like, I know that he has said that to me before. I just want someone to feel what I feel, like I can't. He's tried, but I can't know what he's feeling. And I thought, damn, if Billy feels this way, he feels this way. Maybe there's something there. Maybe it will help Lee kind of, I don't know, just see some similarity and some strength. And I'm super excited that this has kind of come out of that, because I think it's been cathartic for him. And I think it's been really cool experience for you and Brian to feel like, there's some, like, this is important, and it's also been really eye-opening for me just to kind of see how this matters, how this is bigger than maybe I thought it was.
Can you talk about maybe some of the stigmas that you had around mental health or around what Lee was experiencing, and why that was so difficult for you to understand?
Yeah, I think, as we talked about, rural areas, small town, I had a dad who was hardworking, like just work ethic, head down, go to work. You don't go call in sick. You don't show much emotion. We had grandpas that were our father figures, our male figures in our life are awesome, but they are emotionless characters in a sense. I think we've seen that ease up over years, but when we were little, there was no tears. You didn't cry when people died. You didn't cry at those things. And I think I've kind of been that way. Lee's definitely more sentimental. That's another thing that you guys share a little bit. Like
I cry
when he got married, I gave the best man speech, and I told him that I'm like, me and Dad had our wives convinced that this was it. This is the best you got. There's no emotion here. And now you have to come along and do all this romantic shit and give them hope that we are capable of it. And so I think, that was hard. Like, I'm more wired like that, like just naturally. And not that it was a stigma, not that I felt that he was weak in any way. Not at all. I just didn't know how to say the right thing, what to do. My first reaction is, did I make this worse? Was I a part of it? I knew, I was very aware, being 5 years older than him and being a type A and being, we went to a small Lutheran school, like he's mentioned, and being good at athletics and getting good grades and doing all that stuff. That was my role. That was what I cared about. He was different. He had his own his own mode of getting through that. And I think I was aware of that. He looked up to me. And when he started telling his story and he started telling me how he was feeling, my first reaction was, did I cause this? That sounds really selfish, and maybe it is, but it was a fear that I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want him to I didn't want to lose him from my life, and I didn't want me to be something that made him not want to be around me. So it was hard, and I didn't know how to deal with that emotion. I didn't know how to express it to him. I didn't know how to talk to my parents about it, my wife about it, so it was a lonely spot too for us on this side going, I want to help, but I can't fix it. I don't know what to do.
I'm curious, did you guys talk to your parents about this then? And it doesn't sound like, for you, Scott, at least anyway, that there was a we'll just get over it sort of approach. It was like, did I cause this? I'm wondering, was there a just get over it from anybody else, or were people listening but maybe not understanding?
I don't know if there was a just get over this. It was almost like, I don't know if we ever sat down like all as a family. I talked to her. I talked to my sister. I talked to my brother. I talked to my mom. I talked to my dad. But it was more like one-on-one. Like I explained the story 4 times. Like I told them all how I was feeling. But I don't think we ever sat down together where I didn't know what to do, or where I messed up is I told them all this stuff, but I didn't give them any idea of what I expected or what I needed from them. Like I wrote that long post, and in that post it says like, give me some whatever. It gives some instructions, but I didn't say to them like, because what Scott always would tell me is, I just don't want to say the wrong thing to make it worse.
Yeah.
And the only thing that you're going to tell me that's going to make it worse is to go, you're a pussy, wake up, get over it. This isn't real. It's all in your head. Unless you say that, everything else, I can't. And like he said, I always wanted someone to understand. I had to get over that as well. Like I could tell him every day how I felt, but you don't know how it feels until it's been a year of feeling that way. And if you haven't experienced that, you can't fully grasp it. Like I don't know what it's like to have cancer. Not that I'm not comparing the two, but like I don't have that shared experience. He can see my personality change, and he can see, because they always knew, like we went to his cabin one summer, and like we were there for 2 days, and I was awesome for the most of the day. But then I get this sinking feeling like I'm going to F this up, and I'm going to screw up, and I'm going to wreck the whole weekend because I'm going to get down. And then you automatically get down, and I could see everybody else's stuff change. But I didn't tell them to say, I didn't like give them instructions or say, it's okay. Just let me I'll get over it. But when people then start saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? That's when it gets tough.
I think, like immediate family, it's been a struggle that I think my sister would acknowledge too. Like sometimes it has made a distance between all of us for the last few years. When we started out here, you asked us if we get along and stuff, and we do. The 3 of us get along really well. But when you have Lee and his experience and what he's gone through with depression and anxiety, you also have the complications of marriage that's in the middle of that. I have a wife and 2 kids that depend on me. My sister has a son and a husband, and my mom and dad have a life, and you got all of those things working together. It complicates things. And sometimes I think Lee was pulling away.
Oh, for sure.
But we were also all pulling away at certain times because, damn, was it frustrating at Christmas time or Easter or Thanksgiving to have that hanging over you because it was there. Yeah. There was like a little bit of a cloud. And gosh, this last year, Christmas, this last year was fun. It was fun. It was awesome. Like we laughed. We played card games and board games like our family used to do. And we haven't done that for a few years. And so it was pretty cool. So there was never I don't think anybody ever said, even, both my grandpas are passed away now, but I don't think even them would have said that. No. But I do think that there's a lack of understanding of this stuff. Even if you want to know, want to do the right thing and want to say the right thing, you just don't know how. And that's how I felt. And I think that's how my dad feels. I think that's how a lot of men feel, and women for that matter. It's not something that's been talked about as a family. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it too is everybody's human nature of wanting to fix somebody else, fix their problem. And it's not, and that's one thing I tell everybody. Like nobody else can fix this. He's not going to say, there's not something he's going to come up with in his head that's going to make me go, you're right. I shouldn't be depressed. Wait, man, thank you. Like, this is gone now. Great. So don't try. You don't have to try.
Yep.
Like, and I did a poor job. I just was like, laid all this out there. Like I damn near killed myself and I am like struggling and okay, figure it out. Like I didn't give them any instructions or because I probably didn't know what I fully expected from them, you know? So, and like my dad he never once in my life told me really suck it up or be tougher or whatever. He would have, and if I would have said, and I did, I sat and talked to him on the phone about it. But it's not something that's offered, you know, it's not like he just would call, you know, like that's not how we grew up. That's not how any of the people were. They figured, well, if he needs help, he'll reach out. And that was something Scott said too. Like, if you need anything, let me know. Well, the last thing I'm going to do is reach out and say, I know you have this whole life and you have kids and a wife and a job and stuff stressful, but here's my problems. Like you said, like privilege. We had the same childhood, basically. We had the same parents, but I'm way broken because of something in my brain. So please listen to me complain about how tough my life. That just wasn't in my brain at all.
Scott, can you think of things that you didn't want to say to Lee when the two of you would talk?
I don't know if there was something that I really did sometimes. I feel like avoid asking the real question because I didn't know if I don't know if I was prepared for the real answer or I was afraid that the answer might be not what I wanted to hear. As he was pulling away, and I know that my sister and I had these conversations too, that we were just so afraid of losing him suicide or losing him that he just wasn't going to be in our life. He was going to completely isolate himself. And I just was so fearful that for some reason I was part of that. Like I contributed to that. And I think because of that, because I didn't ask the right questions or even ask the honest questions or the hard questions, it made it harder for us to make that connection sometimes.
This question's for both of you. From opposite sides of the spectrum, what do you think is the best thing family members can do to support somebody who's having mental health issues then? I mean, from your perspectives.
And I was going to ask that too. I was actually curious if Lee, did they provide you with tools to share with your family and friends that you could communicate to them and say, hey, here's how we can talk about it?
Yeah, my counselor it just goes against everything inside of me to do them, like, which is what a lot of counselors are there for, is to not let you stay in your comfort zone. It's basically saying this, because there were so many times my ex-wife and basically everybody, nobody wanted to hear how bad it was. They wanted to be like, oh, he had a scare. He was feeling really down. Like this might've been the reason. And I wanted to say, no. I felt like this for 10 years to where I wished I would die. Like I was sad days that I woke up. And I would say, like, ask to other people, ask the tough questions. Because the last thing, my ex-wife had a family member pass away from suicide. So it was really hard for her to listen to it. And like, I relate to music and shows and podcasts, obviously, a lot. And there's a show on Netflix by Ricky Gervais called Afterlife. I shit you not, the last episode of the last season is he's taking pills and his dog is barking at him and stops him from taking pills. So like, I was like telling my ex-wife, please watch this. Please. And it took a long time because she's like, well, it's too tough for me to do that. And I'm like, it's way tougher for me to feel it. Like I need you to like try to experience it. Even if you don't completely understand it, don't assume that it's okay. Like just as like, he's okay now. That's past.
Right.
I don't want to hear the hard parts because if you, it's invalidating how I felt. Basically.
I wonder if it was hard for her because she had that family experience, and she might not have wanted to watch that either because now she's had two experiences in her life, and so I can empathize with that.
Yep. I totally understand. I understand that completely. But that's what me personally, I can't speak for every person that's been in that situation. I tried, like, I had a blog about songs that I wrote and what each line meant to me, just because that was one thing a counselor said is to blog about it. And just all this stuff, just and like share it with people saying, like, this is how I feel. Like, this is what it means. And I was expecting them to just be like, I could get it now. And that's not the case. But for people just to say, or to sweep it under the rug or not want to hear it, that's an invalidation of how bad it was. Like, you're just, I know you had a tough time, but I don't think it was as bad as you're telling.
I kind of second that sentiment. I will say this, like, me and Lee have had conversations throughout this process. My sister and I have too. We talk about things, text a lot, and they're pretty open.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that sometimes they weren't specific. There was surface level stuff there. Like I said, people, to your point, people ask, "Hey, Lee, how you doing?" They're hoping that he says good. Because if he says, really shitty,
yeah.
Oh, fuck, I don't really want to hear this story right now. I'm at Easter, or I'm at Thanksgiving, or, that's a different, but this podcast, guys, opened that line a little bit more for us because it it gave us an icebreaker topic. Like, hey, dude, did you listen to the new podcast? And there's a topic there. And I've shared it even with my wife, and she doesn't always listen to the podcast. It's a little male centric and it maybe doesn't apply, but
what?
But we'll talk about the concepts. And she's been like, it's really cool. Like, even we were talking about like the male brain and maybe why I'm at 40 years old feeling a different way than I did at 20 years old, and how that affects her and how we have conversations. It's spurred conversations on that way. And I think that's really an interesting way to look at this for families, members like myself. You could find something like that to kind of start the conversation, so it doesn't have to be so awkward. It doesn't have to be like, hey, nice to see you at Thanksgiving. How's your depression? It's just a bit easier to kind of ease into it if you're having these conversations offline, not at the holidays, not at those times, and you can go grab coffee or a weekend like this. I think that's our purpose even for this weekend, just to kind of reconnect without kids, wives, mom and dad. We can vent to each other about all of those things, and we can be honest and real with the three of us. And we did that when we were younger, and sometimes the last few years we haven't. So that would be, I guess, my suggestion is just find a way to break that ice, find a way to make it less awkward, because it really is an awkward conversation. And it's not one that you hope to have, but it's important to have.
Necessary.
Really, really important.
Yeah.
That is, if the two of you are our only two listeners till the end of this podcast, I just feel like that is reason enough for us to continue recording episodes so that you guys can have that dialogue. And I sincerely hope that people who are listening, maybe this podcast is an opportunity to open up a dialogue with others, and like hearing you guys talk about hanging out with your family and stuff like that. Like, it's hitting me a little bit too, because I've pulled away from that for a variety of reasons, and it's reconnected a dialogue with one sister, but not with the other. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad that what we're sharing with you guys is resonating with you, but just know that what you're sharing here today is also resonating with us. So we just really want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and share your stories. We really hope that others who are listening, like you said, Lee, recognize that you're not alone, that this is something that people feel, and it's okay to feel it. You just need to recognize that we need to get support for it so that we can move on and not feel like this all the time. I imagine that you have highs and lows still,
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that it's not a magic bullet. It's not something that, therapy doesn't fix everything. I've talked about before how mindfulness doesn't solve all the world's problems. It just makes the world's problems a little bit easier to manage, or makes your problems a little bit easier to manage. And it's wonderful to hear that you have taken steps to learn how to manage these ups and downs emotionally as you feel them. And we're really happy that this podcast has been a part of that dialogue in your family's life. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and we will let you get back to enjoying each other's time as a family.
Good.
All right. Thank you guys so much for everything you do.
For Scott, for Lee, for Brian, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.